take us through that moment when you found out that you were nominated for an Emmy for your work on Hannah Gatsby's Nanette.
Sure. I mean, it was incredible. I would say that like that moment for me is quite defining for a number of reasons, and like not all the reasons what people would expect. Like obviously getting an Emmy nomination for something was extraordinary. Like I remember staying up that night waiting for the nominations because by that stage there'd been enough hype around it that we thought that Hannah might get one, and then she did, and it was pretty amazing to get something that you never thought was possible, because when you're making content here, you're existing within the Australian ecosystem, and so we have the Logies and we have the actors, and I'd been fortunate enough to had won a couple of actors and had been to the Logies before, so I was just like, okay, so this is like leveling up, which was awesome. And for something like Nanette, which was an extraordinary piece of work that Hannah put together, I was just thrilled that they were starting to receive that, but then also I could like tag along for it. Yeah, it was great. Like best 72 hours of, or like
The whirlwind trip.
Pretty much. Like it really was. Like they fly you over, and your expectation of what it is versus the reality of what it is slightly different.
Yeah.
Which was actually awesome, because from that moment in time, I felt like it was a really pivotal moment for me, because I was achieving something that I'd wanted to achieve for a really long time. Silly, but like, as a kid, I was just like, oh, wouldn't it be great to like socialize with, the elite people in America? And so you're there with these people, but then, on the flip, you just realize that it is just another day. Like everything that you see of the Emmys is, it is what it is. Like it's glamorous and it's extraordinary. But then on the other side of it, what you're not seeing is that it's just a whole bunch of people walking a red carpet, being kind of normal. And I tell this one story of that day to try and get people to understand what it felt like. Like we walked the red carpet, we were super early, because we just didn't know any other way. And then as soon as you got in, like the auditorium was closed. And so the only thing to do would be to get a snack from the cafeteria, which was like popcorn and a warm beer in a plastic cup. And we were sitting on the floor that you paid for, and you're sitting on the floor and you've got like the new Queer Eye Fab Five over there, and then just like people pooling in, sitting on carpet in their best dress.
Yeah.
And you just kind of laughed. You're like, this is not what I
real.
thought it was going to be. But I loved it because it was just one of those moments where I was like, right, okay. So what I thought this is versus the reality of it puts a lot of things into perspective for me.
Yeah, it was real. It became almost, it was tangible at that point.
But it was so great. Like it was one of the best kind of weekends. And also I was part of the Creative Arts Emmys. So the main one, if you will, was the following weekend. So it was a little bit more low key, but it would have happened the following weekend too, because it's just...
The one that you're at, there was Creative Arts, and then the following week, which would be what, just...
It's kind of like the kind of prime time awards. So a lot of the ones
talent.
that... like best... Not so much. So the comedy stand-up award is in the... They put it in the Creative Arts weekend, because there's just so many. Like there's so many Emmys that are given out on those days.
Right.
From makeup to visual effects, they're not part of like the main broadcast. The main broadcasts are your key, like best TV show and best miniseries, best actor. They're all for those. But I'll take Creative Arts. It was a really fun time.
Was that high on the radar? Because you studied media at uni in television production. So when you're studying at that point, was it already on the radar? Was it like, this is a target, I'm going for this?
Weirdly, yes. Yeah. Like I'd like to say no to
why,
that.
Why weirdly though?
Because it just feels like such a a childhood dream where you're just like you target these things. So I guess I would say that like my ambition for a weekend like that was pretty like high. Like I wanted it. And then when you get it, I realized I'm like, maybe I didn't need that, because now it's not so much that I didn't need it, but I felt like I just didn't feel any different. And I thought that I would.
Yeah.
So as a kid, you would be like, oh, if I reach that kind of peak of my career, I'll feel like I've made something of myself. I didn't. And so that was kind of humbling. And that's why I say, to go back, like, why it was such a pivotal moment in my career. Not only are you getting this opportunity to be part of something like that, it was also quite a moment where I kind of parked a lot of my ambition following it, because I realized that what I was doing to that point was like kind of living my life in segments, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as a freelancer, I mean, you freelanced a lot as well. Like, I was living my life for the contract, and it was like 3 months, 6 months, and if you're lucky enough, like 12 months.
And it's always focused on the next thing.
Always focused on the next thing. Always focused on what I could be, how I could elevate my career, or what direction I was going to go in. And I think that following that weekend, I realized that I was doing that way too much, and my ambition kind of lowered in a really healthy way after it. And that kind of like childhood dream, to like bring it back, I realized what it was, and that none of that was actually serving me well to be present. It sounds really naff, because, people talk about that all the time in terms of, just making sure that you are present and you're focusing on what you're doing now, and the work's got to be good now. And, of course there are elements where you are doing that, but it all kind of crystallized for me at a weekend like that, or looking back on it, that I was not doing that, not enough. And so, yeah, in a weird way, like, it just reduced my ambition, but in a good way for me.
It could have been one of those things. What was the time frame? So let's say, call it 10 years, maybe longer, right? Between when you set that goal and achieving that goal, and in the pursuit of achieving that came a lot of lessons and a lot of wisdom also, right? So then even though you had set that a benchmark and saying that I'm going to be working towards that, one of the benefits of having that was that it did bring on a whole bunch of other layers to your personality. And then once you had achieved it, you realize that a lot of the fulfillment that you get from the work and you get out of doing what it is that you do isn't tethered to the accolades that come with it, but it's in the work itself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was weird, because it felt like I needed a moment like that for me to realize it, which in hindsight, I think if I'd given it more thought, I would have realized it a lot sooner. But yeah, it was just because of the ridiculousness of that weekend, and kind of, it's the Emmys. And then realizing I didn't feel very different at all after it. And I was just kind of thrilled for Hannah, and thrilled for what my contribution could have been to that as well. Because like, it was so successful because of what she wrote. What they wrote. And it was just very nice to be part of something like that. And then to like have some life lessons off the back of it. I feel like it's really served me quite well.